The year was 1986, a cold and gray winter that hung over Southington, Connecticut like a dying breath. When Carmen Snedeker first saw the house on Meriden Avenue, she felt something strange, an inexplicable pull mixed with a chilling unease. The house was big, old, and quiet, with tall windows that seemed to stare back at her like lifeless eyes. But she had no choice. Her eldest son, Philip, was fighting cancer, and the hospital was only a few miles away. The rent was cheap, almost suspiciously cheap. She convinced herself it was a blessing until she found the basement. The landlord had mentioned a small work area down there, but when Carmen descended those narrow, creaking stairs, the air changed. The smell hit her first thick, sweet, and rotten, like flowers left too long in water mixed with something decaying. At the bottom, her flashlight caught the gleam of metal tables, drain holes in the floor, and strange metal tools lined on a rusted tray. It took her a moment to realize what she was standing in: an old embalming room. The house had once been a funeral home. The family moved in anyway. Carmen tried to ignore the chill that never left the basement, or the way the walls seemed to sweat at night. Her husband Alan and their 3 children packed and tried to make it feel like home. But from the very first night, something was wrong. Philip couldn't sleep. He said he kept hearing whispers, not just in his head but outside his room. Voices calling his name in tones that weren't human. At first, Carmen thought it was the medication making him hallucinate, but soon, her other children started waking up screaming, claiming they saw a man in a black suit standing by the basement door. Sometimes the house would creak in ways that didn't sound natural, like footsteps pacing slowly from room to room. Shadows stretched longer than they should, as if the light itself bent unnaturally around them. The mirrors fogged up on their own, even when the air was freezing cold. One night, Carmen walked past the living room and froze. There was a faint flicker of light coming from the basement door. It was slightly open, though she was certain she'd locked it earlier. From within, she heard a low humming sound, like someone chanting. When she slowly opened the door, the light went out instantly, and a rush of icy air struck her face. The humming stopped, but she could feel someone standing there, just beyond the dark. Over the next few days, the family began noticing other things. The furniture would be slightly moved. Lights would flicker whenever someone mentioned the basement. The rosary hanging above Carmen's bed would twist and turn by itself, its cross upside down in the morning. Philip's behavior grew darker. He would sit alone for hours, staring into space, whispering to someone only he could see. He told his mother that the man in the black suit was showing him things, terrible things. Carmen tried to pray, but even her prayers felt hollow inside that house. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard a faint scratching sound coming from the walls, from beneath the floor, from the corners of the ceiling. And sometimes, she swore, she could hear the sound of a coffin lid closing somewhere deep beneath her feet. Then came the night that changed everything. Carmen woke up to a sudden thud. When she looked toward the hallway, she saw Philip standing motionless, facing the basement door. His eyes were wide, his lips trembling. "There's someone down there," he whispered. Carmen tried to pull him away, but he wouldn't move. "She's calling me," he said softly. "The lady with the cold hands." Carmen froze. Before she could react, the basement door slowly creaked open by itself. The darkness inside looked thicker than any shadow she had ever seen. It almost seemed to breathe. And then came the voice, soft, low, and unmistakably real. "Come back to me," Carmen screamed, slammed the door shut, and dragged Philip upstairs. But that voice, female, mournful, and ancient, echoed through the walls of the house for hours, as if mocking her fear. That night, she finally understood. This house was never empty. Something had stayed behind, something that refused to rest. The nights in the Snedeker house grew longer. The coldness that once hid in the basement now crawled through the walls and into every room. The house began to breathe, whisper, and move like something alive. Carmen tried to convince herself that everything had a logical reason. The wind, the pipes, the stress. But deep down, she knew there was no ordinary explanation for what was happening. It began subtly, lights flickering even when the bulbs were new, the smell of decaying flesh drifting up from the basement at random hours, thick and nauseating. The crucifix above the dining room wall began to turn on its own slowly, deliberately until it hung upside down. Then came the nights. The family would wake to the sound of footsteps running across the ceiling. Not the shuffle of rats or creaks of wood, but distinct, heavy human footsteps. Sometimes it was pacing, other times it would sprint, stop, then start again. And just when someone dared to open their bedroom door, the footsteps stopped. Philip suffered the worst. His once bright, gentle personality was changing. He started speaking in low, broken tones, claiming that they didn't want him to leave the house. Carmen found him one morning sitting on his bed, his fingernails dug into the mattress. The walls around him were covered with deep, parallel scratch marks, as if something with claws had tried to tear its way out. When she asked him who did it, he whispered, "The man in the black suit, and the one with no eyes." Carmen's heart froze. Philip said they came at night, standing at the foot of his bed, whispering to him about death. One of them told him he belonged with them now. Sometimes he would wake up with his bedsheets wrapped tightly around his neck, as if someone had tried to strangle him while he slept. One night, Carmen heard the sound of water running. When she checked the bathroom, every faucet in the house was open, gushing with cold, dark water. The mirrors were fogged, and through the mist, she saw handprints, small, childlike handprints dragging downward as though someone was trying to crawl out of the glass. Her youngest daughter began talking to a nice woman who visited her at night. When Carmen asked what she looked like, the girl said, "She wears a long gray dress, and she doesn't have feet. She floats." The house itself seemed to react to fear. When someone cried, walls creaked louder. When someone prayed, the air grew colder. And when the family tried to ignore it, the entity punished them. One evening, Carmen was preparing dinner when every cabinet door in the kitchen slammed open at once, hitting the walls with violent force. The sound echoed through the house like thunder. The light bulbs shattered, glass raining down like hail. She screamed and ran to the living room, only to find the couch overturned and the TV flickering on and off, showing only static. Amid the noise, a faint voice emerged from the television, a woman's voice, whispering, "You took my place." Carmen froze. The whisper turned into laughter, dry, choking laughter that filled the air. That night, Alan found their eldest son standing in front of the basement door again, his face pale, his eyes empty. "Philip," he said softly, "what are you doing down here?" Philip didn't answer. He just lifted his hand and pointed at the door. "She's inside," he whispered. Alan tried to open it, but it was ice cold to the touch, like frozen metal. Suddenly, from the other side of the door, 3 loud bangs echoed one after another. The whole door shuddered. Then came a voice, deep, guttural, and human. "Get out!" The entire house fell silent. Days passed, and the haunting grew violent. Objects flew across rooms. Doors slammed with invisible force. One afternoon, Carmen saw a dark shadow crawl across the ceiling like a living thing, twisting and stretching its limbs, its mouth gaping open in silent screams. Every night now carried a rhythm of terror. Footsteps, whispers, slamming, a crying. The house was no longer just haunted, it was possessed. And whatever was inside was growing stronger. Carmen finally realized she couldn't fight it alone. She needed help, and there was only one couple known for confronting things like this: Ed and Lorraine Warren. They were about to step into one of the darkest investigations of their lives. The air inside the Snedeker house had turned heavy, as if thick with something unseen, a presence, ancient and aware. Even during the day, the sunlight struggled to enter the rooms. It bent and faded, leaving long, thin shadows crawling over the walls like black veins. By now, the family no longer felt safe anywhere. The entity was no longer hiding in whispers or flickering lights. It had started to show itself. It began one evening when Carmen was folding laundry. She was humming softly, trying to drown out the dread that haunted every moment. Then she heard a faint whisper near her ear, so close that she could feel the breath on her neck. "You can't leave me." She froze. The air behind her turned cold. Slowly, she turned around, and there, only a few feet away, stood a figure, blacker than shadow, its edges trembling like smoke. She couldn't see its face, only two hollow spaces where eyes should have been. The thing swayed slowly, as though breathing, and then it vanished, dissolving into the air with a hiss that smelled of rot and sulfur. That night, Carmen woke to the sound of her name being whispered, not once, but over and over. It came from every direction, above her, beside her, beneath the bed. The whispers grew louder until they merged into a low growl that vibrated through the walls. When she opened her eyes, she saw hands, pale, bony, gray hands reaching out from beneath the sheets, clutching her wrists, her ankles, holding her down. She screamed, but her voice was swallowed by the dark. Then, just as suddenly, it stopped. The hands were gone, but the bruises stayed. Philip's behavior had become unrecognizable. He no longer spoke like a child. He muttered in languages no one could identify. He would draw symbols on the walls, shapes that twisted and looped like serpents. His eyes looked older, distant, as if something else was looking out from inside him. One afternoon, Carmen found him in the basement. The room was freezing. He was standing before one of the metal tables, tracing something with his fingers. When she stepped closer, she realized it was a name carved into the steel, not by him, but by something old, etched deep and dark. Rev. A. K. Magner Embalmer. Philip turned to her slowly and whispered, "He says we woke him up." The rest of the family began seeing things too. Carmen's daughter saw a woman floating through the hallway, hair tangled, eyes hollow, her dress soaked in something black. Alan, the father, felt invisible hands touch him in his sleep. At first gentle, then cruel, scratching, pulling, whispering his name in a voice that wasn't human. Even guests who visited the house complained of nausea, sudden cold, or violent headaches. One woman fainted after seeing a dark figure crouched in the corner of the living room, staring at her with an open mouth that seemed to stretch endlessly. The most terrifying incident came one night when Carmen was alone. The children were asleep. The house was silent. She sat in the kitchen, reading her Bible, whispering prayers, when she heard a deep rumble from the basement. Then the basement door burst open with such force that it cracked the wall. A foul stench poured out, thick as fog. The light above her began to flicker violently, and in that trembling light, she saw movement. Dozens of shadowy shapes, crawling and twisting across the floor, like bodies trying to climb out of the dark. The hum began again, low and rhythmic, like a ritual chant. Words she couldn't understand, echoing off the walls. Mortem, venite, domum. She fell to her knees, covering her ears, but the voices grew louder. The air itself seemed to vibrate. Then, from within that darkness, a face emerged, gray, eyeless, its mouth gaping wider and wider until it wasn't a mouth anymore, but a void. From that void came a scream, high, inhuman, shattering glass and light alike. When Carmen opened her eyes, everything was silent again. The lights were off. The basement door was closed, but on the floor, drawn in ashes, were 3 crosses, all inverted. By now, the family was collapsing under terror. Alan had stopped sleeping. The children refused to stay alone. Every mirror in the house began showing strange reflections, not of the room, but of a funeral parlor, with coffins lined along the walls. Sometimes, when they walked past, they swore they saw themselves lying inside those coffins. The entity was feeding on their fear, growing, manifesting, transforming. It wasn't just haunting them, it was possessing the house itself. Carmen realized that the evil within was not a ghost. It was something far older, something that had attached itself to the death, sorrow, and ritual that had once filled that place. The Snedekers had become its prisoners. And so, in utter desperation, Carmen reached out to a pair of people whose names were whispered in stories about demons and hauntings, a couple who had faced the darkness more than once and lived to tell of it. Ed and Lorraine Warren. They were on their way, but the evil waiting for them inside the Snedeker home had no intention of letting anyone leave alive. By the time Ed and Lorraine Warren arrived in Southington, the Snedeker house had already become something beyond haunted. It was infested. The very air seemed to resist them as they approached. The snow on the ground was untouched except for the faint impression of footprints that led up to the porch and stopped halfway, as if something had simply vanished mid-step. Carmen met them at the door. her face pale and hollow from sleepless nights. "Please," she whispered, "make it stop. It wants my son." Lorraine stepped forward first. The moment she crossed the threshold, her body stiffened. The clairvoyant's eyes flicked toward the stairs, not the ones leading up, but down to the basement. "It's still here," she said quietly, "and it knows we've come." Inside, the house groaned as if aware of their presence. Every room felt charged, the air thick and electric. Ed began setting up his equipment: audio recorders, cameras, infrared meters, while Lorraine walked slowly through the living room, her fingers brushing against the walls as though she were reading their memories. She paused suddenly by the dining room table, her breathing quick and shallow. "Blood," she whispered. "So much blood." Ed looked at her. "Human?" Lorraine nodded, tears welling in her eyes. This was never a home. It was a passage. They descended into the basement. The light bulb above them flickered violently, casting long, pulsing shadows over the cold stone walls. Ed's flashlight cut through the darkness, illuminating the embalming table, the drain, and a shelf stacked with cracked jars. Lorraine shuddered. "This was where they opened the bodies," she said. "But something else happened here. Something unholy." The basement floor was wet, not with water, but a dark, viscous stain that smelled of metal and rot. The air grew colder the further they walked. Then Lorraine stopped, her gaze fixed on the far corner. "There," she whispered. "Can't you feel it?" Ed raised his flashlight. The beam caught something: a figure standing motionless in the dark. For an instant, they saw a man in a mortician's apron, his face bloated and gray, eyes black pits. He stared directly at them. Ed stepped forward and the figure vanished, leaving behind only the sound of slow, mocking laughter echoing through the basement. That night, Lorraine refused to leave. She insisted the entity would grow violent if the house was left alone. As dusk fell, they gathered in the living room: the Warrens, the Snedeker family, and a priest they had brought for protection. Lorraine sat quietly, eyes closed, whispering prayers. Suddenly, she gasped and clutched her chest. Her head jerked back, and she began to speak in a voice not her own. Low, guttural, ancient. "The dead belong to me. Their flesh fed the dark. Their souls sealed my name." Her hands trembled as she pointed toward the basement door. "He opened the gate here," she said, her voice breaking. "The embalmer. He called to them. He wanted to speak to the dead, and something answered." Ed tightened his grip on the crucifix around his neck. The temperature in the room dropped sharply. Their breath misted in the air, then a thunderous crash from below. The basement door burst open and slammed against the wall. A wave of icy air swept through the house, knocking over candles, rattling furniture. The priest began to pray aloud, his voice shaking. From the darkness of the stairwell, a figure crawled out, not walking, but dragging itself across the floor. Its skin was gray and wet, its fingers long and broken. It made a sound like choking on water. Carmen screamed. Ed raised the crucifix and shouted, "In the name of Jesus Christ, I command you." But before he could finish, the entity screamed a sound so piercing it shattered every bulb in the house. The room plunged into darkness. Lorraine's voice cut through the chaos. "It's not one spirit," she cried. "It's many, bound together, enslaved here." In the flashes of lightning from outside, they saw them: shapes moving along the walls, crawling from the ceiling, hundreds of ghostly faces twisted in agony. Men, women, children, the souls of those whose bodies had been desecrated in that very basement. Their eyes burned with sorrow and rage. Ed grabbed a vial of holy water and began to cast it toward the shapes, shouting the rite of protection. The air hissed, and the stench of sulfur filled the house. Then, for a single moment, silence. Lorraine collapsed to the floor, whispering, "It's hiding now, but it's waiting." The Warrens left that night knowing what they faced was no simple haunting. It was a demonic infestation born from human sin. The embalmer's black rituals had opened a door between worlds, and something monstrous had stepped through. The Snedekers begged for help. Ed looked at them gravely. "We'll have to perform a full exorcism," he said. "But be warned, it won't let go easily." And in the quiet that followed, from somewhere deep below their feet, came a single, slow knock. Once, twice, 3 times, as if the house itself was answering him. The next morning, Pale daylight broke over the Snedeker house, but it brought no comfort. The walls still whispered. The air still pulsed with that quiet, invisible heartbeat that only Lorraine could hear. She told Ed she hadn't slept. Not because she couldn't, but because it wouldn't let her. I heard it all night, she said softly. Footsteps, weeping, chains dragging along the basement floor. Ed nodded grimly, clutching his rosary. We need to know what really happened here. And so began their investigation. A descent not just into a haunted house, but into the black heart of human depravity, the hidden past. Through records and interviews, Ed uncovered that the house had once been the Hallahan Funeral Home, run by a man named A.K. Magner, an embalmer, rumored to have unusual interests. The local archives whispered of missing corpses, unofficial autopsies, and a series of strange late-night visitors seen entering the building decades earlier. Lorraine's visions confirmed the rest. Each time she walked through a room, it replayed a memory, like the walls themselves were bleeding with the past. In the parlor, she saw a faint image of a coffin lid being shut, but the corpse inside opened its eyes. In the hallway, she saw the embalmer bending over a body, whispering words in Latin, cutting into flesh, mixing blood with candle wax. And in the basement, she saw dozens of shadowy figures, standing in a circle, their faces blurred, chanting softly, Mortem apertum est, da nobis transitum. Death is open. Grant us passage. Lorraine fell to her knees, trembling, clutching her crucifix so tightly it left bruises in her palm. He tried to call back the dead, she whispered, but something else answered. The entity revealed. That night, as the Warrens prepared to document the manifestations, the house came alive again. Every door slammed shut. The wind outside howled like a living thing. The temperature plummeted. The walls began to throb, pulsing like the inside of a beast. Lorraine suddenly screamed, not from fear, but pain. Her eyes rolled back, and she was thrown against the wall as though an invisible hand had struck her. Her voice changed deep, echoing, not her own. He opened the gate with blood and sorrow. The dead obeyed him, until he betrayed me. Ed rushed to her side, shouting her name. Who are you? He demanded. Lorraine's body jerked violently. Her lips moved, and the thing inside her hissed. I am what waits beneath the skin of this house. The lights exploded. Furniture toppled. The air filled with the scream that seemed to come from everywhere at once. High, shrill, and human, yet layered with something that was not human at all. When it ended, Lorraine collapsed, gasping for breath. Ed helped her to her feet, trembling. It's not just one demon, she whispered. It's many bound together by the rituals done here. Every soul that passed through this place was taken. Their pain, their death, fed it. The ritual chamber. They went back to the basement, now reeking of rot and burning oil. Ed carried a crucifix, Lorraine a vial of holy water. Carmen followed behind them, clutching a candle and whispering the Lord's Prayer. As they descended, the candlelight flickered and bent. The shadows stretched unnaturally long, twisting into shapes that looked almost human. When they reached the bottom, Ed noticed something he hadn't seen before: a false wall, covered with rotten boards. He pried it open, revealing a hidden room behind it. Inside, the air was suffocating. The floor was covered in old, dried symbols, circles, sigils, Latin phrases scrawled in what looked like rust or blood. In the center of the room sat an old, wooden table, blackened by time, and on it dozens of small glass jars. Inside each jar was something moving, shadows swirling, faces pressing against the glass, screaming silently. Lorraine stumbled back. These are vessels, she whispered. He trapped spirits inside them, and fed their essence to something darker. As she spoke, one of the jars cracked. A thin tendril of black smoke escaped and coiled in the air like a living thing. It hissed and then vanished into the wall. Immediately, the entire basement began to shake. The sound of dozens of voices filled the air, whispering, laughing, crying. The house wailed. The darkness takes shape. The lights failed. Only the candle remained, its flame bending sideways in an invisible wind. Then the sound came: footsteps, slow and heavy, descending from nowhere. A tall, skeletal figure emerged from the shadows, its face hidden beneath a torn, black shroud. The stench of death rolled from it. Lorraine held up her crucifix. In the name of Christ. The entity lunged. The candle blew out. In total darkness, Ed heard the sound of flesh being dragged across concrete, nails scraping the wall. The hiss of laughter right beside his ear. "You can't save them," it whispered. "They are mine." He struck a match, and for 1 second, light filled the room, revealing faces on the walls. Dozens of them. Pale, screaming faces pressed into the concrete, as though the house itself was made from the dead. The match went out. The laughter returned. Ed began reciting the rite of exorcism, his voice steady despite the trembling in his hands. Lorraine joined him, her eyes shining with tears. The room howled. The jars shattered one by one, releasing wailing shadows that swirled upward, shrieking. Then came silence. The entity was gone. For now. The discovery. The next day, police and church investigators examined the hidden chamber. Old records confirmed that the embalmer, Reverend Magner, had been defrocked years earlier for conducting rituals of necromancy under the guise of mortuary work. The church had ordered the building condemned, but it never was. The Warrens realized the truth. The funeral home had been a gateway. Every corpse brought through its doors became part of a ritual that strengthened something infernal beneath the house. Lorraine told Carmen quietly, "He didn't summon the dead. He invited hell." The Snedekers could no longer live there, but leaving was not so simple. The demon had marked them, bound their terror, their grief, and their faith to the house itself. The Warrens prepared for one final battle, a full exorcism. And this time, it wouldn't be just a haunting to end. It would be a war to close the gates of hell itself. By the time the Warrens returned to the Snedeker home for the final time, the place no longer resembled a house. It was a wound of festering, living wound that breathed, groaned, and watched. The windows had gone opaque, as though the glass itself had died. The air was thick with the stink of mildew and something far worse, despair. Carmen and her children were waiting outside. They hadn't slept in days. The youngest had begun speaking to the dark man again. The priest sent by the diocese, Father Bishop, stood silently clutching his Bible, the pages trembling in his hands, though there was no wind. Lorraine glanced up at the roof. "It's waiting," she whispered. "It knows what we came to do." Ed turned to the priest. "Then let's not give it another night." The beginning of the rite. They entered the house together, Ed carrying a crucifix, Lorraine holding a relic of Saint Benedict, Father Bishop clutching the bound exorcism text. The instant they stepped across the threshold, the temperature dropped 10 degrees. Frost began to crawl along the inside of the walls. Father Bishop began reading in Latin, Exorcizo te, omnes immundus spiritus. The lights above them flickered violently, then exploded, raining glass over their heads. From somewhere deep inside the house came a sound like a heartbeat, slow, deliberate, pulsing through the floor. Then came the whisper, "Leave them to me," Carmen screamed. The whisper was inside her head. No, inside her soul. Lorraine fell to her knees, gripping her crucifix until her knuckles went white. "It's rising from below," she gasped. "It's not bound to one room anymore. The whole house is alive." The basement awakens. They moved down into the basement, the birthplace of it all. The door slammed shut behind them, locking on its own. The sound was final, like a coffin ceiling. Every object in the basement began to rattle, the jars, the tables, the chains still hanging from the rafters. The air shimmered as though the walls themselves were breathing. Ed placed the crucifix on the embalming table. "This is where it began," he said. "And this is where it ends." Father Bishop raised his voice, the Latin words echoing in the cold. "Per signum crucis, libera nos, Domini." At first, only silence answered. Then the lights went out, and the basement laughed. It was not one laugh, but many men, women, children, all twisted together, overlapping, each voice shrieking with madness. The walls began to bulge, faces pushing through the plaster, screaming faces, their mouths gaping open as if suffocating inside the walls. The table shook violently, and a shadow began to rise from it. Tall, deformed, its head crooked, its arms long and sharp as bone. The air around it shimmered like heat, though the room was freezing. Lorraine shouted, "It's feeding on their fear. Don't give it power." The thing turned its head slowly toward her. Its mouth opened, and from it poured a thick, black mist that crawled across the floor, reaching for her legs like fingers. The confrontation. Ed splashed holy water in the direction of the creature. The mist recoiled with the hiss that smelled of burned meat. The shadow screamed a sound so deep it shook dust from the ceiling. Father Bishop's voice rose louder, his words trembling with faith and fury. "In nomen Jesu Christi, ex ad hac domo." In the name of Jesus Christ, leave this house. The demon's laughter turned to a roar. The crucifix on the table bent backward, metal groaning under invisible pressure. Suddenly, Carmen collapsed, clutching her stomach, screaming. Something invisible dragged her across the floor toward the dark corner of the basement. Ed ran after her, shouting, "Let her go." The air grew dense, so dense he could barely breathe. Then, from the darkness, two glowing eyes appeared. They were not red or white, but hollow pits that devoured the light around them. Lorraine pressed her relic to the floor, shouting prayers through tears. "You have no claim here," she cried. "This family is under God's protection." The demon's voice came from everywhere at once, vibrating through the walls. "You can't protect what's already mine." The walls began to bleed. Thick, black liquid poured from the cracks and pooled around their feet. The basement trembled violently. Then came the storm. The house fights back. Every light in the house flashed at once. Furniture upstairs crashed, glass shattered, doors slammed open and shut. The air was filled with the screams of the damned. Ed held the crucifix high, shouting the final command of exorcism. "By the authority of heaven, by the blood of the Lamb, and by the Holy Spirit, I command you, leave this place and return to the pit." The demon screamed again, louder than thunder. Shadows burst from the walls, spinning like a tornado, circling the room, tearing at everything in sight. The basement windows shattered inward, glass flying like shards of ice. Lorraine fell to the floor, clutching her ears. She could hear hundreds of voices pleading, begging, crying for release. She screamed back, "Go into the light. Leave this house." The shadows twisted violently, then began to fade. One by one, their screams fading with them. For a moment, silence. Then, a single, guttural roar, not of pain, but rage. The entity, now barely visible, lunged at Ed. The crucifix in his hand flared with blinding light, searing through the darkness. The smell of burning filled the air, not of fire, but of something ancient dying. The walls cracked, the floor buckled, a blinding flash filled the room. Then nothing. The aftermath. When Carmen opened her eyes, the basement was quiet. The air was still. The smell of sulfur was gone. Lorraine was sobbing softly, holding her relic close to her chest. "It's over," she whispered. "For now, it's over." Ed looked around the room. The black stains on the walls were gone. The symbols had faded. The faces in the plaster had disappeared. But etched into the concrete floor, still faintly glowing, were three words burned into the stone. "I am waiting." The Warrens helped the family pack what little they had left. The house stood silent as they left, watching, listening. As their car rolled away, Carmen looked back one last time. The upstairs curtain moved. No wind, no people, just movement. Months later, the house was cleansed and resold. The new owners claimed to hear nothing, see nothing. But Ed and Lorraine both knew better. Some doors, once opened, never truly close. And deep beneath that house in Southington, Connecticut, beneath the concrete, behind the walls, something still breathes. Something that remembers. Something that waits. The Snedeker family left the house before dawn. The morning air was heavy and colorless, the sky bruised with the fading storm. None of them spoke during the drive. The children sat wide-eyed in the back seat, each staring at something only they could see. When Carmen finally looked in the rearview mirror, she saw the house gray against the pale horizon. For a moment, she could have sworn she saw a figure in the window upstairs, standing perfectly still. Then it was gone. They never went back. The haunting that wouldn't end. Days turned into weeks, and life seemed to crawl back toward normalcy, if normal still existed for them. But the shadows had followed, Carmen's eldest son, Philip, woke screaming at night, claiming he could hear whispering voices beneath his bed. Her youngest began drawing strange pictures, black rooms with red eyes, and figures without faces. Even after the exorcism, the sense of being watched never left them. Every mirror reflected something a little wrong. A shadow too thick, a light too dim. Lorraine called once, her voice low and trembling. "Carmen," she said. The energy there was ancient, and it was intelligent. Evil doesn't always vanish. Sometimes, it waits. Carmen never told the children that she'd started hearing it again, that same faint whisper in the dark. "You left me here." The investigation. After the Warrens' report was published, the house became infamous. Paranormal researchers, priests, and skeptics swarmed the small town of Southington. Some claimed it was a hoax. Others left after one night, refusing to speak of what they saw. One investigator described seeing a shadow crawling across the wall like smoke. Another said the basement reeked of formaldehyde, though no chemicals were stored there. The diocese refused further comment, stating only that a cleansing ritual had been performed successfully. But Ed Warren's notes told a different story. In his final case entry, weeks before his death, he scribbled, "The entity was not banished, only bound. It clings to the memory of pain. It feeds on it. One day, when the memory fades, it will rise again." The file was stamped closed, but Lorraine never stopped praying for the family. Years later, years passed. The Snedekers moved across the state, trying to start over. But trauma has a long shadow. Carmen's marriage fractured. Her eldest son was institutionalized after several violent outbursts. He claimed he could still see the man from the basement. In 1992, she was invited to speak publicly about their ordeal. She agreed, hoping it might finally bring her peace. But the night before her interview, she woke suddenly, her room pitch dark. At the foot of her bed, she saw a shape, a silhouette, darker than the night itself. It didn't move. It didn't breathe. Then, in a voice like gravel being crushed underfoot, it whispered, "Do you remember me?" She screamed, but when she turned on the light, the room was empty. The air, however, still smelled faintly of embalming fluid. The house reopens. In 2009, a new family bought the Southington home. They said they'd heard the stories but didn't believe in ghosts. For months, nothing happened. Until one night, the new owner, a man named David, went down to the basement to fix a leaking pipe. He later told a neighbor he found a strange mark on the wall, almost burned into the wood. It wasn't there before. It said, "Still here." He moved out the following month. The house stands to this day, pale and quiet on a lonely street. Children hurry past it on their way to school. Neighbors say the lights sometimes flicker at night, though the power company finds no faults. Some nights, people swear they can see movement in the basement window, a figure pacing slowly, back and forth, as though waiting for someone to come home. Lorraine's final vision. Before her death, Lorraine Warren revisited her old case files. When she reached the folder marked Southington, she paused. She told her caretaker she dreamed of that house almost every night. The faint smell of roses mixed with rot. The quiet hum of voices beneath the floor. In one of her last interviews, she said, "That house isn't haunted. It is the haunting. Every death, every sorrow that touched it, they're all trapped there, living echoes." The exorcism drove out the demon, yes, but it left the door open. Final words. And perhaps that's why no one stays there long. Because on cold nights, when the wind moves just right, people claim they can still hear a child crying inside the walls. Others hear the faint rustle of a priest's prayer. And if you stand close enough to the basement window, you might hear breathing, slow, heavy, patient, waiting. Even now, decades later, the story remains half legend, half truth. But every investigator, priest, and skeptic who's ever stepped into that house agrees on one thing. The air in that place feels wrong, as if the house itself remembers, as if the house still hungers, and somewhere, deep beneath the floorboards of that Connecticut home, the darkness that once called itself human is still whispering the same words it did to Carmen all those years ago. "You can leave the house, but you'll never leave me." Thus ends the haunting of the Snedeker family, one of the most terrifying true cases ever investigated by Ed and Lorraine Warren. But evil, as they say, never dies. It only waits for the next door to open.